Well, hey there, Internet people. Welcome back to Green Wing Gaming, or welcome if you're new. If you're a returning viewer, you already know the drill, but if you're new to the channel, this is a Monday video, and on Monday videos, we like to talk about Warhammer stuff. We like to talk about the hobby. And today, we are continuing on with our faction focus on the Dark Angels. In the previous video, we kind of talked about the general lore of the Dark Angels, where it stands now, what their whole backstory is. It was a very shallow dive into their story, so if you like just a quick summary of their lore, that's the video for you. If you want something a little more in-depth, there are plenty of other resources on YouTube. There's a lot of people who have talked about this stuff, so there are other videos out there. But I happen to think that the one we put out was a pretty good summary of the backstory. But as for today, we are continuing on by talking about the 10th edition detachment for the Dark Angels. Now, in the previous video, we did talk very briefly about the overall detachment rule, like the army rule for the Dark Angels. Spoiler alert, it's not great. It's very situational and kind of goes against the grain of everything else about being a Space Marine, being durable and very high leadership. Or I guess in 10th edition, technically low leadership is better. So yeah, being a very low leadership, high durability army, and yet the detachment ability only takes effect if you fail a battle shock test, which is super situational, and everything about your army is trying to not be in that situation. So yeah, it's not great. which is what my assessment was in the previous video. But today we're going to look past the core rule itself, and we're going to focus on some of the good stuff about this detachment, and that is the stratagems and the enhancements, because they're actually pretty solid. I am a fan. I'm enjoying them. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that and give you guys an idea of what they are. The document for all this stuff is available currently on Warhammer Community for free. You can download it yourself. But if you want someone to just talk about it for you real quick, you found the right video. So hopefully we can make this a pretty quick summary of all that. But before we dive into a deeper discussion about all of that, I would just like to remind you guys that this YouTube channel is very young. At time of recording, we are still only 2 months in. This will come out during my 3rd month of being on YouTube. And with the channel being this new, literally any level of engagement from you guys really helps us out. Even just by clicking on this video, you've already done me a huge favor. But I would really appreciate it if you could do me one more. You know, watching all the way to the end of this video also really helps. The more view time I get, the better. Obviously, liking the video really helps with the algorithm, and subscribing, again, really helpful. Plus, if you subscribe, we have more of these videos coming out every Monday. We're going to be continuing the faction focus on the Dark Angels in the next couple of weeks. And every Friday, we have actual gameplay videos where we actually get to play various tabletop games on the channel, which I've really been enjoying. So far, we have been playing a game called Rangers of Shadowdeep, but in the near future, I should be finally expanding into actually playing 40K here on the channel. So, looking forward to that. But with all of this shameless self-promotion out of the way, we're talking about the Unforgiven Task Force stratagems and enhancements, so let's just get into it. Okay, so we're talking about the rules for the Unforgiven Task Force, and I hope you guys will bear with me a little bit. I do have my laptop open to the download PDF for this rules, so I can have it handy when I'm talking about it. So we're going to start off by talking about the stratagems for this detachment. Now, I've got the first two up here. The first one is called Grim Retribution, and basically what this does is for 1 CP, when you take a casualty from a shooting attack, you can then immediately shoot back as if it was your shooting phase. Now, you have to shoot at the unit that attacked you, and you can only do it if that unit was an eligible target. So, if you got hit by indirect fire from an artillery piece that you can't see, this stratagem doesn't help you because you obviously can't shoot at a target you can't see. Because for the most part, unless you're also doing it on a unit that has indirect fire. But yeah, you can only shoot at eligible targets, but presumably if that target shot at you, it's probably an eligible target. This can be useful sometimes where you just want to put out a little bit of damage, maybe if they're like multi-targeting. Ultimately, this is not... It's a very thematic stratagem. I don't know is that it's the most useful, but it could come in handy in certain situations. It's very similar to like in 30k the return fire strat, or not strat. It's called a reaction in 30k, but here it functions basically the same. And it could be a situation where your opponent might want to take a few pot shots at one of your big shooty units, your really tough units. But then because you have this stratagem, all of a sudden they might not want to and be like, oh, I'm just going to take a couple pot shots at you and then charge someone else. Well, no, because I'm now going to spend 1 CP and shoot at you with my big dangerous shooty unit. And completely obliterate you. So now all of a sudden your opponent has to think twice about where they're allocating their shots, about whether or not they want to try to do chip damage to some of your more durable units. So kind of useful. Anyways, on to the next stratagem. We have Unbreakable Lines, and what this does is just you use it in your opponent's charge phase after they have successfully completed a charge, and when that charging unit attacks the unit you put this stratagem on, you get -1 damage for the subsequent fight phase. Again, this is a little bit of a weird one because you have to declare it in the charge phase. But to be honest, a lot of the times, if you're being charged by like a really scary melee unit, you probably already know you're going to want to do this. So it can be a little weird that you have to do it in this charge phase and not in like in the fight phase, because like you're not able to wait to see what happens to other charges. You have to decide when your unit gets charged. Again, kind of limiting, but ultimately this can be pretty useful if you get charged by a really big, scary unit and you want to try and limit their damage potential to try and save one of your units. So again, useful, but maybe not as useful as it initially sounds. -1 damage, always helpful, but eh. Next, we have a stratagem called Armor of Contempt. Now, this is actually a holdover from the Gladius Strike Force detachment. They also have this stratagem, and literally what it just means is when an attack is allocated against your unit, you worsen the AP of that incoming attack by 1. Yeah, that's really powerful. I would argue right away that generic Space Marine strat we get is way more powerful than the two like uniquely Dark Angel strats. I think this is way stronger. So that's what Unforgiven does, that's what Armor of Contempt does, which is one of the strats available in the Unforgiven Task Force. Next up, we have a stratagem called Unforgiven Fury, which is another 1 CP strat. Literally all of these are 1 CP. I'm not going to keep repeating that. All of the stratagems in this task force are 1 CP. And from what I've been seeing, most stratagems seem to have been cranked. They're not as powerful as they got in previous editions, but they all also pretty much only cost 1 CP. So what does Unforgiven Fury do? Well, you target one Adeptus Astartes unit from your army that has been selected to shoot in the fight phase. Until the end of the phase, weapons equipped by models in your unit have the lethal hits ability. In addition, if one or more Adeptus Astartes units in your army are battle shocked, until the end of the phase, each time a model in your unit makes an attack, a successful unmodified hit roll of 5+ scores a critical hit. So to summarize that, you gain the lethal hits rule, and it goes off on 5s and 6s instead of just 6s. Because normally the lethal hits rule only works on a natural roll of a 6, but with this stratagem, you gain lethal hits and it goes off on a 5+. So that's a Dark Angel specific stratagem. I don't think this is in the Gladius Strike Force. I think this is specific to the Dark Angels, and that's actually really strong. But again, this is kind of playing into the theme of the army getting stronger when you're battle shocked, which again I'm not crazy about. The fact that you only get that lethal hits popping on 5s if a unit in your army is battle shocked, which again, you're a Space Marine, you're not super likely to have a battle shocked unit. Now, to be fair, you can't, because battle shocked units can't use stratagems. Obviously, the target unit is not battle shocked. But as long as anything in your army is battle shocked, your lethal hits get even better. So it's kind of good to just be able to hand out lethal hits. That's always for 1 CP. That's not a bad trade, but you only get the extra special part if in the unlikely event that you have a battle-shocked unit. So again, not crazy about that, but it is still a pretty even without the battle shock part, just gaining lethal hits pretty useful. That's going to come in really handy if you don't already have a character handing out lethal hits. So next up we have a stratagem called Intractable. Like all of the others, it's 1 CP. You use it in your movement phase just after an Adeptus Astartes unit from your army falls back. The effect is that until the end of that turn, that unit is eligible to shoot and declare a charge even though you fell back. So again, this is something that has existed in one way or another since like near the end of 8th edition. Having a stratagem called Intractable where you can fall back and not suffer the penalties of falling back. This is something that a lot of armies now have some way to do this. I've been looking at a lot of the other indexes. A lot of armies have gained some ability to fall back, shoot, and charge. But to be fair, this is just a 1 CP stratagem, so that's a pretty effective way to gain it. You don't have to rely on like having the correct combat doctrine declared. That's how it works in the Gladius Strike Force. You don't have to have a particular character attached. You just spend a CP at any time. So it's actually a little bit more versatile. It's not a unique ability, but it is a really unique and easy way to gain that ability. And then the last stratagem that we have here is called Fire Discipline. It happens in your shooting phase, and you target one Adeptus Astartes unit from your army that has not been selected to shoot yet. Until the end of the phase, ranged weapons equipped by models in that unit have the Assault, Heavy, and Ignore Covers ability, or Ignore Cover abilities. That's really strong. I have nothing to complain about there. Like I said, Intractable, it's not super unique, the ability, but it was at least a uniquely versatile way to gain that ability. This one, Fire Discipline, is just straight up good. It's right up there with Unforgiven Fury. I think Unforgiven Fury and Fire Discipline are going to be the go-to stratagems for the Dark Angels. They are going to be the most powerful ones because they're the ones that are most frequently useful and are like unique to the Dark Angels. The ability to gain Assault, Heavy, and Ignores Cover. So now all of a sudden, if you advanced a unit that doesn't have Assault weapons, they now do have Assault weapons. And you ignore cover. Or if you have, gaining Heavy is not super useful unless your unit remains stationary, but even there, I've got a bunch of Intercessors who remain stationary, spend 1 CP, they gain Heavy, so they now gain +1 to hit for remaining stationary. That's useful on a bunch of different units. You can put that on Devastators. You can put that on, well, Devastators already have heavy weapons, but you can put it on pretty much any rank and file infantry unit, Tactical Marines, Intercessors, Infiltrators, Inceptors. There's a whole bunch of units in the Space Marine lineup that could benefit from this stratagem. I think it's going to be one of the big winners of this index. So that brings us to the end of the stratagems. So we're just going to scroll down here to the enhancements. Unfortunately, these are all on one page, so I won't have to be looking away from you guys quite as much. But so we have 4 enhancements in this book, or in this index. It's not a book. I'm so used to dealing with codexes that I'm used to having like a book in front of me when I'm talking about this stuff. But the first of these enhancements is something called the Shroud of Heroes. Now, this is something that has existed in the book, in the Dark Angels for several editions now. It was a thing in 8th, it was a thing in 9th. I think it existed in some form in previous editions, but it's definitely been there for 8th and 9th. It does something completely different now, which I'm not sure how to feel about, but basically the way this works, the way it used to work was the Shroud of Heroes was like a cloak that made you -1 to be hit. You were so heroic and you looked so cool with your cape that you were -1 to be hit. That was how it worked. Now what it does is when you die on a 2+, you set the model back up. And they're continuing the theme of being better when you're battle shocked, which is not the greatest, but The way this works is that if you die on a 2+, you can put the model back on the board as close as possible to where it died, but out of engagement range. And if you were not battle shocked when you died, you come back with 3 wounds, but if you were battle shocked when you died, you come back with full wounds. Again, I'm not crazy about it needing to be battle shocked to be more effective, but whatever. It's a resurrection ability. That's always going to be powerful. Big picture wise, I'm not crazy about so many armies having access to that. This was literally something that in previous editions was like only Guilliman and Celestine could do this, and now it's literally just an enhancement. This feels a little... It feels like this is an ability that is becoming way too common, but I won't deny that it is pretty strong. So if you have like a really killy, like dangerous character that has like a great melee weapon, dies in combat on a 2+, they come back. So it's a way to kind of guarantee that your Death Star character won't just immediately die, and it kind of gives you a better chance of keeping them around. So next up we have something called the Heavenfall Blade. Again, this is something that has existed for the Dark Angels for a really long time. And the way this works now is that put it on any Adeptus Astartes character, add 1 to the attack, strength, and damage characteristics of this model's melee. So yeah, you put this on like a Space Marine captain or any character really. They get 1 extra attack, 1 extra strength, and 1 extra damage. Really strong. Really a good way to double down and make an already good melee character even better. But again, continuing with this theme of being better when you're battle shocked, if the bearer is battle shocked, instead of gaining 1 to all of those stats, you gain an extra 2. So when you're battle shocked, you somehow have even more attacks, even more strength, and even more damage. Again, I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm not loving this theme of you have to fail a battle shock test to get better. So most of the time you're not getting it because you're probably not going to be battle shocked most of the time. But the next enhancement we are dealing with is Stubborn Tenacity. So again, Adeptus Astartes model, so basically any character can take this. While the bearer is leading a unit, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, add 1 to the hit. If the bearer's unit is below its starting strength, and add 1 to the wound roll as well if the bearer's unit is battle shocked. So if you're below starting strength, you get +1 to hit. If you're battle shocked, you get +1 to wound. Again, you're usually not going to get that +1 to wound, so +1 to wound can be super strong, but you're just usually not going to have it. And so this is probably the weakest enhancement because you have to have lost models for it to be relevant, and it's just going to be a +1 to hit. It's just going to be a +1 to hit. That's what it's going to be 90% of the time. So yeah, this is probably the weakest enhancement. You have to take casualties before it's useful. You're probably not getting the actually good part. The +1 to wound would be amazing. Just getting +1 to hit, less so. Still kind of useful, but I'm not sure I'm willing to pay the points for it because all of these things cost points. I'm not sure I'm going to be willing to spend points just to get a +1 to hit after I take casualties. Yeah. So, and then the last enhancement, we have the Pennant of Remembrance. This can only be put on a Blade Guard Ancient, Primaris Ancient, or Terminator Ancient. If you're a regular Firstborn Ancient, I guess you're up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. Sorry. While the bearer is leading a unit, models in that unit gain a Feel No Pain 6+. While that unit is battle shocked, it becomes a 4+ Feel No Pain. Again, I'm not happy about all of these things requiring you to be battle shocked to actually be worth taking. I'm not sure I'm going to spend points just to give an Ancient the ability to hand out a 6+ Feel No Pain. I don't know if that's worth it. If you have a couple points spare, sure. But again, you have to be taking an Ancient, which without this enhancement, I'm not sure you would. Shroud of Heroes and Heavenfall Blade are probably the enhancements you're going to be going for. These other two are just super situational, and you're probably not going to take them. And they get so much better when you're battle shocked, but you're probably not going to get battle shocked because you're a Space Marine. This is the fundamental problem with this whole theme. I understand that they've been trying to develop a theme here. I just think it's a bad theme, and it's not particularly useful because it means your army is only functioning when you're failing leadership checks. You have to roll poorly to get the thing you want. That's not great. But yeah, so that brings us to the end of this video. We've covered all the stratagems, we've covered all the enhancements. They're kind of a mixed bag. Only really 2 of these enhancements are really worth taking, and the stratagems, maybe like 3 or 4 of them are going to be like showing up a lot. But obviously any tricks are good tricks, and we'll just have to see. I've only played like 2 games of 10th edition, so who knows, maybe these are better than I think they are. I could be wrong. I would be very curious to know what you guys think. This is one of those areas where I'm really going to want to hear from you guys. What do you think about this? What are your thoughts? Am I missing something? Am I running the math wrong? That's entirely possible. Math was never my strong suit. So, if you think these are better, or if you agree with me, particularly if you agree with me, let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for getting to the end of this. Just another quick reminder to maybe consider subscribing so you can see some of the other content we put out. We already have a bunch of other videos on the channel that I would really love if you guys could go take a look at those. I think you might enjoy them. But otherwise, I'd love to see what you guys have to say. I would love to see you in some future videos. But in the meantime, happy wargaming.
Onward to glory!